again for our monthly session, conversations with music photographers, specifically jazz photographers. Today, January 21st, we have our guest, Stuart Brinin, who's a California-based music photographer. I'm Rotarian. I'm a member of the Jazz Journalists Association and also an amateur street photographer. So welcome everyone. Stu, whenever you're ready, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can pull up some of your photos and discuss them.
Well, good morning. At least it's good morning for me. As Araya said, I'm based in California. I had never aspired to be a professional photographer. Photography was my hobby. And when I moved to California from New York, I happened to be living across the street from a photographer. And this photographer used to have a lot of garage sales. And so I wandered over there one day and I saw a darkroom in his garage. And he wound up teaching me how to develop film and print. And that was really the beginning of the magic for me for photography. So I encourage anyone who wants to be, whether they want to be an amateur photographer, a full-time photographer, to take a darkroom class and develop. I think it gives a really good foundation about photography that you don't get from digital. So I read about, after I learned how to print, I read about a photo show in San Francisco about Golden Gate Park. And coincidentally, I lived near Golden Gate Park and I was there almost every day. And I always brought my camera with me. So I submitted some prints and they got accepted. And at the opening, I met this documentary photographer who did a lot of work with Black Panthers. His name was Perkle Jones. And he's no longer alive, but he became a mentor for me. And his wife was also a photographer. So taking classes with him, talking with him, he was very encouraging to pursue photography more than I was doing. He thought I should really get more involved in the field. So that's kind of what gave me the idea of possibly doing this, maybe not at that point for a living, but just to be more serious about photography.
Yeah, that's very true. I too started doing a little more serious amateur photography after I took a darkroom class in college. It's a very good foundation.
Absolutely.
How did you start getting into music photography, particularly blues and jazz?
Good question. So when I lived in New York, back to New York, walking around New York, this was, I guess, late 60s, early 70s. I'd always hear people or see people sitting on their steps with their transistor radios playing Latin music. I hear it all the time walking around. They're either listening to Latin music or a ball game. And that was kind of like me just walking around the streets. And so I started to really, I love the sound of Latin music. So I started to hang out at clubs, or if I was too young, try to sneak into clubs. And I'd go to the Village Vanguard, I'd go to the Village Gate, I'd go to Metropole, and I loved it. And so at night, underneath with my own transistor radio, I'd go under the covers and when my family was sleeping, and I'd listen to the Symphony Sid show, which is this great Latin show that they had on WBAI. And I would try to listen to the music and not wake up my entire family. And he would take requests. So I'd call in, the show was really late. And he'd go, me again, because I'd be calling Joe Cuba, Mongo Santa Maria, Tito Puente. I'd like call for all these, things, and I just love the music. And so when I came out to San Francisco, for one reason or another, I started to go really start to get into blues and blues shows. And why don't you put up the first photo that you have? Well, I'll start talking about it till he does that. So San Francisco had this great blues festival. And it was I think at the time it was the longest running blues festival in the country. And unfortunately, it's no longer. But what was great for me as a new photographer, it was incredibly photo friendly. You could go up, there was a photo pit, but you could go up to, really close to the stage. Nobody ever questioned anything. And you can get these and they had these great artists there, really animated. And I just got into the music. And so I'd go to this festival, and then I'd also hang out at clubs. So when I started getting a kind of collection of pictures of various musicians, I'd send them out. I'd send them to magazines. I'd send it to record, companies. I was sending it all over, just trying to promote my photography. This shot is of Robert Cray and Albert Collins, and Robert Cray was a big fan of Albert Collins. And if you look closely, Cray is playing Albert's, Fender Stratocaster. You could see just beneath his right hand, you could see Albert Collins, sign the guitar. So I love the shot of the two of them looking at each other. But anyway, I wound up getting involved and starting to work with Rounder Records, which was like a blues folk label. And they referred me, I guess they were doing, Downbeat was doing a story on Roomful of Blues at Slim's, which was this blues club, which is also no longer exists in San Francisco. And they asked, I wasn't really privy to this conversation, but they asked Rounder for a recommendation for a photographer. And that's how I first met Dan Willett, who was a writer I worked with for many years, who's been a downbeat writer for a long time. And I think we worked for maybe about 15 years together. So what I would recommend anybody who's trying to get into jazz journalism would be to collaborate with a writer. I think it's just great to have that kind of connection. And after Dan, I worked with Dan for, like I said, about 15 years. And then after Dan left, I hooked up with Andy Gilbert, who's part of this class right now. And I was just so fortunate to find two writers who are wonderful writers, and it's made, they basically get the assignments and I just, do the photography. So it's a great collaboration for a magazine if you have a writer and a photographer. It works really well. They get the story, they get the art, they don't have to go looking for the art. And it's just an ideal situation.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that Otis Taylor on the drum?
Oh, good question. I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Anyway, so can you switch to the second photo? So Dan pitched a story to Downbeat, a story on John Lee Hooker. And so he called me up. Apparently the story was going to happen. So we went to Hooker's house in Redwood City. And I was told going into this by his management that I'd have 10 minutes to do a photograph. Well, it was going to take me more than 10 minutes just to sit. I brought a backdrop and lights. I was going to do this portrait of him. And it was going to take me more than 10 minutes just to set up, much less, do any photos. So sitting there waiting in his living room, and I look up and he's got this signed jersey of Duke Snider from a Brooklyn Dodger, who was like my favorite baseball player growing up in Brooklyn. And I look, and I have a photo. I'm not going to take this, move my computer, but in my office, I have this photo of Duke Snider in the dugout in Brooklyn. Anyway, so Hooker comes out, and I don't talk anything about, shooting. We just talk about, baseball and the Dodgers. And so we just had this great conversation, forgetting about the 10 minutes. So I go and I said, let me set up and I'll call you when I'm ready and we can, we'll do the shoot. So this is, thinking about, we were really hoping that this was going to be a cover story. So I picked a backdrop. I was kind of looking at pictures of Hooker, and I picked a backdrop that I thought would be complementary to his skin tone. And I love how that looks, how the backdrop works with him. Anyway, I started taking pictures, and for people who want to know more about how, what I do or what I choose, I shot slide film because I wanted to have the best color rendition I could get because we really hoped that this was going to be a cover story. So that's what I used, for this photo. And I started posing him, and he looks at me and he says, "Man, you don't have to do that. I've been doing this a long time. I do this a lot." So he just started posing on his own. I was amazed. Like, he looked down, he put his hands on the guitar. It was perfect. So I didn't really have to do anything, but get the pictures right. As things happen, it became a cover story, a cover shot, and I really like the way how it all came out.
Mm-hmm.
So next photo. Let's see. By the way, while we're loading that, this is supposed to be an interactive class. And so I want to just mention going into it, if you have any comments, questions, anything, put your hand up, do a chat. Harar can probably monitor that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And feel free to interrupt me. I'd love to kind of get some feedback from you folks and have that kind of, interaction over this. I don't want you to just have to listen to me. So please feel free and comfortable to do that. Okay.
Howard?
Since you said that, Stuart, just to ground us, you were born and raised in Brooklyn, and then you moved out to San Francisco as an adult, or what?
I was actually born in the Bronx. I think I lived there for about 2 diaper changes, and then we moved to Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn till I was about 20. I went to school there. I think I left when I was about 23, and I moved to California.
Did you have any educational training in the arts at all?
I went to school. I majored in political science. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. That didn't happen. And so I actually got accepted to NYU Law School, and my mother never forgave me for leaving California and not doing that. I mean, it's always my son, the lawyer, sounds much better than my son, the photographer. But in any case, I don't think she ever forgave me for that move. But when I came out to California, aside from that photographer who taught me how to, darkroom, Kirkle Jones, who I mentioned, taught at the San Francisco Art Institute. He taught a documentary class there, so I audited his class. And then I took some other classes at a junior college, in photography, but pretty much self-taught. Or I met people, met other photographers who shared knowledge, and that's what I always do as well.
Mhm.
Plus, I taught a photojournalism class at UC Berkeley, which also had darkroom part of it. So I was always looking to kind of get more fundamentals, learn more things about photography. But I never really went to like a photography school. So this is Elvin Jones. I shot this at a club that also no longer exists, called Kimball's East. And I met Elvin through a friend of mine, a drummer friend of mine named Robert Kaufman, who teaches.
What year was this? What year was this?
This was in the, I'd say the hooker shot was like in the mid 90s. I think
Oh,
this was a little earlier than that.
Mhm.
And I got so I met Elvin through this drummer friend of mine who teaches at Berkeley in Boston. And he introduced me, and Elvin and I became good friends. I mean, I would always see him when he'd come to California, shows at SF, at the SF Jazz or different clubs. I'd always get together with him. And so I get a phone call. Downbeat, I guess, knew my relationship with him, and he was selected to be in Downbeat's Hall of Fame. And so they were going to be doing this, big spread on that. And they told me, look, we'd really like you to do this shoot, but you can't tell them what it's about. I said, fine, no problem. So I call him up and tell him, and he was doing at this club. I said, Elvin, I want to come and do some shots at, sound check. And he said, Stuart, no problem, whatever you want to do. It was great. So this was taken at a sound check, and which was great for me because I could be on stage, I could be as close, move around the drums wherever. He didn't care, wherever I wanted to be. And what I love about the photo is like his hand, that hand sort of dominates, with a cymbal. He was the strongest musician, the most powerful jazz musician I've ever met. Plus the fact, he also, what do I say? I just love the way he played. I was really into drum and drummers, and he just like amazed me every time I saw him. So after the show, he also could sweat like nobody's business. he was the sweatingest performer I've ever seen. So after the show, I go backstage and I'm, wanting to thank him, and he's dressed in this orange robe. He's drenched. He's dressed in this orange robe. He looks like a prize fighter. And I don't know why I didn't take a photo of him. It was just, he really looked like he finished the fight. So he comes and sees me and gives me this like huge hug, which from Elvin is kind of like a chiropractic adjustment. When he hugs you, it's like you could feel all your vertebrae, suddenly getting in the right place. But it was just, I loved our relationship. It just kind of came from a good place. He signed a bunch of photos for me, and I was just super sad when he passed because I think he was just an incredible legend. I don't think there's ever going to be another one like him.
On a side note, I don't know if any of you have seen this obscure film, a psychedelic Western called Zachariah. It's available on YouTube. And he plays a drummer / gunslinger in a alternate version of the West.
I'd love to see that. I haven't. By the way,
it's free on YouTube.
This photo was originally shot in color, and I scanned it, and that's the nice advantage of digital photography, is that you can convert it to black and white very, very easily. Shooting like when you would shot color film, then printing it black and white was a big pain in the ass. And so with digital, it's like click, click, you can do it in like, in a matter of seconds. So I decided there's nothing wrong with the color shot. I just thought it just looked, stronger as a black and white image.
I really like the geometry, the abstraction of the geometry on this. And like the edges you have, like that just over his shoulder, just that little slit of blackness makes that so sharp. And in contrast to the veins and the, skin texture on his hand.
Yeah, I love the hand.
Yeah, but also like looking down at his left hand, where his knuckles are lit, and then the way you've captured the motion of his drumstick. I mean, the light work on this is really nice. It's really, and the textures, like, again, I'm stuck on that symbol on the upper
Right
left.
side or left side?
Upper left. Because it's just such a sharp line, and then it also reflects the sharp line, or not reflects, but just the whole geometry of the thing. And your angle on this, you were below him, right?
I was below him. I was literally on stage, kneeled below him. And that's the advantage, I said, of sound check, of being able to photograph, because I'm not, I'm not supposed to be part of the show. I'm just photographing him, and he just gave me. But I have to tell a quick story about, and sound check. If you have an opportunity to photograph somebody at a sound check, you have this kind of advantage, right? I went all the way around the drums. I photographed, I was behind him, aside of him, everything. So I was doing, but I have a funny sound check story. So I was going to do a review photo of Oscar Peterson at Yoshi's. And so I contacted his management, which I think was his wife, actually, and he was coming. And so I asked if I could do sound check, because it was an expensive show and I didn't want to disturb any of the audience or move around. So I thought if I could do the photos at sound check, that I would get it done. So they give me permission. I show up at sound check. In walks Oscar Peterson with an orange sweatshirt and a green cap that said Chicago Stagehands. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, this is like Mr. Elegant Oscar Peterson. And I'm doing, like I said, there's no way I could photograph this guy, and put in a magazine having him dressed like that. So I'm waiting, and I took a few pictures and I knew they would never go anywhere. So I stopped, and then he did this piece at the sound check, and it was this gorgeous, gorgeous piece. And he looked at me and he said, and I said, what was that? He said, John Lewis. And I said, oh, was it a John Lewis song? And he said, no, because he had just died. And so he did this song, this ballad for him. And it was beautiful. So I told him, I said, look, I got to come do the show tonight and photograph you. And he looked at me and said, not a problem. He said, you're cool, you're fine. And I think that's the thing that makes, as much as what you do as a photographer, getting a rapport with somebody. If you can take a little time and establish a rapport, that's what happened with the hooker thing, which made the photo, and my connection with Elvin. It's like, it just gives you, know what you need to do as a photographer, but I think having connections with an artist, it's everything. And it's really why I think I got into, doing jazz. I love the stories and I love the connections with the artists that I photograph.
I think this is true of writers also.
Yeah. Next one.
Yeah, before we go on a side note, Andrew Gilbert wrote in the chat that Sonny Fortune next to Elvin on the saxophone.
It is Sonny Fortune. That one, good catch, Andy. So this is picture of Sonny Rollins, one of my favorite photographs that I've ever done. I love the glasses and I love the reflection and the glasses of him. I also love the jacket. I wanted to steal his jacket from him. I love the shoulder raise. And a lot of elements of this photo I really like. The problem, this was I shot this I think in 1996, around there, for SF Jazz. The difference of, and I want to talk a little bit about equipment, because unlike the previous photos where I had access, the Blues Festival, where it was easy to, very photo friendly, SF Jazz, not so much. You are generally, even I was a staff photographer for this shot, but you were still positioned either on the side of a big auditorium or in the back of the auditorium, because they don't want to disturb, the audience who paid a lot of money for their tickets, and I understand that. But because of that, you need a good lens, a good, long lens to get a close-up like this. So I was lucky or fortunate. The money that I made in photography, not necessarily from jazz, I put, the money into equipment back into my business. So the lens I used for this, I actually probably costs now about $5,000-6,000, which I bought used from a San Francisco Chronicle photographer. So you can rent such a thing, but if you are going to concerts in big auditoriums or big festivals, often as a photographer, if there's no photo pit, or even if there is one and you're not allowed in that, you have to shoot from a long distance. So that's what happened in this case. Since that time, and I don't know, just thinking a little bit more about equipment, I always was concerned about the sound that my camera made, like the sound of the shutter, because you could hear I would never shoot like quiet songs. I would just wait till the band would be playing so no one would hear the shutter. But now I have a camera that I bought fairly recently that is completely quiet. It's a mirrorless camera, so you can put the camera on, so it's absolutely a silent shutter. So I could take as many, and nobody knows, so nobody's the wiser that I'm taking pictures. It's a really nice advantage. Nothing that money can't provide.
Yeah.
This was another shot for SF Jazz, Betty Carter and Abby Lincoln. I really like Dave Holland's expression, clapping on the side. My joke about this photo is I heard that they weren't particularly fond of each other. So, and they're two obviously legendary singers. So I used to joke that I tell people, well, that frame, and the next frame, Abby is flipping Betty Carter over her head, with a judo throw. But is that, maybe Howard knows about their relationship. I don't know.
I don't, but I can imagine that they would not have been the best of friends. I knew Betty a little, and I just adore her. I thought she was just such a strong woman in so many ways. But I didn't know Abby Lincoln. I heard her a few times, and with Dave Holland also. Superb, and also powerful in her own right, but completely opposite sort of.
Yeah, very, very opposite personalities. I had a strange connection with Abby. I went to high school with Abby was married to Max Roach, drummer, and so I went to high school with Max's son, and it's funny, and who I'm now, he's an actor in Los Angeles, and we're in more contact now than we were much in high school. So I met Abby, once, I think backstage at a concert at, a show at Yoshi's, and asked about Daryl, who was her stepson. And she said, she looked at me and she said, well, what do you want to know about him? I said, just how he's doing. And she wasn't really comfortable about this. I could tell about this conversation wasn't, she said, well, he's an actor in Los Angeles. I said, yeah, I know that, but how's he doing? End of conversation, didn't want to talk. Meet Max at backstage, and we had dinner at a SF Jazz show together, and went backstage and told him the same thing about Daryl. She said, and he looks at me and said, "You're from Brooklyn?" He said, "You went to Erasmus?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Let's call Daryl up now, right now." And completely different, right? Obviously. And so and that was great. And that was, he was again a nice connection with Max, who then I wound up getting really good photos because now Max is now right. My son.
There's a question in the chat. I think it's a good question about your process of cropping. Is it intuitive? Do you have a method?
I don't think I have. It's not really a method. It's just I always believe that it'll show something more when no, let's talk a little bit about that. I think tighter is always better to me. I think that I think there's if a lot of problems with people is that having too much space with photographs, and I think that they have unnecessary stuff. They just they need to exclude. And I always tell people either get closer, get tighter. I think it just works better. It gives it more like what Howard was talking about, the symbol and thing. I think it's really your attention should go to your subject, not to your not to background. Here's me an example, because so this photo, it's Nancy Wilson and Joe Williams. And this is backstage at an SF Jazz show. I had talked to Joe Williams at a reception the night before this show, and I really liked him as a performer, and I just was talking to him and connecting. So I went backstage to reconnect with him before the performance. And we're just talking, and Nancy Wilson walks in to his dressing room. Obviously, that's his dressing room because his clothes and hanging. And she comes in and instantly does that. She just puts her arms around him. And, and he held it, and I was just going, I love the photo. The thing about it is that I think it's really a hard photo to get anymore, because number one, it's rare that you get an opportunity to go backstage, before a show. It's just something that once upon a time it was no big deal. Now it's much more difficult. And so that's what I like about it. Fast forward, I worked with Nancy a couple of times at I saw her at Monterey, met her there. There was another venue that I used to photograph, Stern Grove, which was this really beautiful venue in San Francisco. They'd have these free concerts. So I was a photographer there for a number of years, and she comes, and I went backstage to before the show to talk to her and just to say hello. And I brought her this photo. And she looked at me, she said, I can't, this is another connection that I can't believe this. I was just thinking about him, about Joe Williams, just coincidentally, I was just, and he had passed away, and she looked at me, she started to get like really emotional and said, I can't thank you enough. This really means a lot to me. And then she thanked me, again from the stage. She gave me a shout out that I'd come in. So love the connections.
Sue, can you tell us what you wrote in the chat?
Well, I
So-
think everybody can see it, but I used to work for Scholars, and all of these artists played there. And after the show, they always wanted a drink. So you had to know what to get the bartender ready for. And we used to sit there and chat, and it was a lot of fun. Nancy had to have Remy Martin, and Abby had her Courvoisier.
I want to say before you leave that one that the eyes, I mean, really are the focus of the photo. And then I'm looking at also his mouth, his eyes, the button on her, the brooch, and then I noticed the ring. So you've got like this vertical that goes from his ring down to the bottom to the gleam on her hair. It's like almost a straight line of focus right up. It's pretty interesting.
And it's purely, it's no flash. This is just natural light. This is just, the light of the dressing room. It's just like black and white, straight shot, nothing, just, the light on her hair is just from the overhead light in the dressing room. Not the, dressing rooms, obviously not the greatest places to photograph. The lighting is never good. There's always, stuff in the background or something. So I cropped this photo pretty tight when I took it, and even more so when I printed it. But I have horizontal versions of this photo and the vertical ones, but I love the expression on both of them. And anyway, two great performers, even nicer people.
High ISO film, I presume. 800.
This
High ISO.
Yeah, not even so much. I mean, I was a big Tri-X fan, and they eventually Kodak would come out with like these faster films, but I had this thing that I could push Tri-X, and I knew how to develop it in a special way that gave it less grain. So that was kind of my film of choice. I pretty much, because I had that down, that process. So I would push, like Tri-X is like a 400 speed film, and I would shoot it at 1600, and then use this, the special developer concoction that I came up with, but this was not pushed that much. This doesn't look, I think this is probably like, straight Tri-X. One of my favorite pictures. This is Regina Carter at Monterey. And I always like sort of off performance moments. I always look for those at anytime I shoot music. I just like to see. So she sort of walked off stage. I'm to the side of the stage, not off stage. There's like a mural, I think, of Duke Ellington. That's what she's in front of. But I loved the light on her. I loved what she was wearing. It was just, it's such a warm photo. And again, I'm trying to think of, I think it's color print film. It's just like fast color print film. And it's been published a lot. It was part of a video that a friend of mine did on Monterey, or on her, that was shown at Monterey. And it's just a picture that I've always really liked. And so I stress to people, like, don't stop photographing just because a performer isn't playing. I mean, look for those kind of in-between moments. I'm always looking for that. And so this was one of those that I always really liked. What else to say about it? Monterey, it's a great festival. It's changed a little bit because of COVID, that they used to have these indoor stages, kind of like nightclubs, and they unfortunately have had to close those. But what I love about the festival is that the artists walk around with the audience. It's very, what do I say? They're very accessible. You will always run into some. So if you're trying to, as a writer, if you're trying to hook up with a musician, very easy to connect with them. And it's just a great hang. It's just this wonderful, you're down in Monterey. It's a beautiful area. They have, right now they have like about 4 outdoor stages, and it's just this wonderful weekend. So if you've never gone to it, please go and check it out, because it's really just a fun place. And so, and a shout out to my friend Andy Gilbert, who I'm lucky that we cover it every year, and it's just really wonderful. This was also at Monterey. This is Donnie McCaslin and John Patitucci. I call this a little bit of luck, but when I took the photo, I did see Patitucci's head, framed in the horn. And this photo was nominated, thank you, hurrah, for like 2019 JJA photo of the year. I didn't win, but oh well. But I love, like, McCaslin, it's so short, the vein popping out of his neck and the position of him performing. I mean, you could really feel, like, the energy. And like I said, with Patitucci, it's one of those moments you just kind of, it's a combination of luck and maybe of just kind of being aware of what's going on, on stage. So that's kind of.
I mean, do you line that up? You see what their positions are, and you're just waiting for the moment where Patitucci's head is perfectly framed?
I saw it and waited for it, like, and kind of moved. I saw it originally and missed it, and was exactly, I was waiting to kind of connect, to do it again, right? That it would come again, so that, right? And I'm sure I took a lot of shots of that, but yeah, I did notice it. It wasn't just like a luck thing and boom, came out later. I did, I saw it, and I said, oh, this is, like, I really like the composition of it.
Yeah.
So this is also at Monterey. This is John Batiste, and it turned out to be, well, you'll see what's coming up. Great performer. He, like, I think last year he won about everything that Downbeat, every award that Downbeat, had, like, so they sent out a list for their contributing photographers, of a needs list, and so I'm on that, and like when they're looking on stories, if they're looking for photographs for stories that they're doing, and for this, Batiste was like, he was, like I said, winning everything, so they really were looking for some good photos of him. So I knew I had this shot when I took it, and what I want to say about horizontal photographs, because we talked about cropping, it's really good to position your subject off to the side. And this is, thank you, this is the reason, because number one, with a piano, it's easy because there's this natural space, right? You have an artist playing a piano, and there's this natural space, right? But I totally did this in a way, hoping just what happened. Like, this is really good for a story, that you could have the photo and have the story off to the side. So yes, I photograph often like that, with trying to position people. It's also a thing about a compositional thing for photography called the rule of thirds, that you shoot, let's say, if you did a tic-tac-toe thing, and then where the lines intersect, and then tic-tac-toe, that's the best place to position your, any subject, music or otherwise, because you want movement in the frame. You do not want things horizontally right smack in the middle. it's much better to have like room within the frame. Certainly for something like this, if you're doing a story, if it's going to be a part of a story, but it's much more interesting that it's not dead center. So it's important when you take pictures to have that. Always check backgrounds. Anytime I take photos, I'm always looking at, if the backgrounds are distracting, if they're too busy, it's kind of like, I guess as a photojournalist, you sort of, when you take a picture, I always tell people when I taught, tell the story with your photograph. First, tell the story. That's the first thing that you always want to do. You want to come back, but then start getting creative. Start thinking about what's different, what you can make that makes an image a little bit more powerful. And that's really kind of my mantra when I go out to work, is I really trying to see what makes it a little bit different. So anyway, but that's why I wanted to show this, with this Batiste thing. It was like the perfect thing. I knew if they used this photo, there'd be like this good space to do a story.
Right, thank you.
So another photo of Sonny Rollins. This is also at Monterey. Bob Crenshaw is the bass player. I'm testing my memory here. Just again, like I just liked the jazz, behind it. I liked Sonny's kind of, it's an in-between, it's another pause moment of him playing but stopping, but it's like just him reacting to the music, whatever's going on. And I'm just checking my time here. So just like the photo, he's also one of my favorite performers, and I've photographed him so many times, and always different. It's always, his concerts are always so great, and his playing, and I've talked with him. I know he's not performing anymore, and Terry will probably know more about this than anybody, but which is really sad. And I talked with him, I think, after Monterey, and he was really not feeling well after this performance, I remember. But going back to the black and white photo that I shot of him, I don't know if it was at Monterey or something. I went backstage, that photo, and I wanted him to autograph it. I rarely do that with artists, but he looked at it, he said, "I really like this picture." And I said, "Great, what's your address? I'll send you a copy." And I did. And he was living up near Woodstock. I don't know if he's still living. I know he's living outside of Woodstock, but he gave me his address, and I sent it. If you ever promise somebody to do something, do that. Better do it. It's like, right? Because they will remember. And so anytime I've ever made that offer, or if I had something that that I thought an artist would really like, do I want them to use it for an album cover? No. But if they wanted something, for personal use, heck yeah. It's part of the sharing thing. Okay. This is Veronica Swift, and this was last Monterey Jazz Festival, and I'd never seen her perform before. Some good friends of mine tell me, "Oh, she's going to be at Monterey. You're going to love her. She's got this gorgeous voice," and they were so jealous that I was going to go see her. So I'm thinking, okay, this, and I told them I'll send you photos, because they were really fans of her. And I was at Monterey, and this couple was behind, who was also excited about seeing her. They had seen her in Birdland or some club in New York, and they said she had this gorgeous voice, and she was this kind of shy singer. And they're describing, her before she comes out, and out comes this woman dressed like a lion tamer, this kind of crazy, wild outfit. missing everything but the whip and the lion, and this really sexy outfit and fringes. And I'm going, so here's this.
And the kiss makeup.
Oh yeah, exactly. I thought it was a combination of between Alice Cooper
Yeah,
and
Alice Cooper
Cher,
and
right? It was like a cross between Alice Cooper and Cher. But she was so visual, it was so animated, it was so much, it was just great stuff to photograph. And then I love the reaction of the guitar player behind it, but it really was, yeah, the makeup, the whole bit. So she's obviously gotten over her calm, quiet, shy demeanor. Somebody said, jazz, not jazz it up, kind of be a little bit more outrageous.
there's a nice concert of her with the Wynton Marsalis Orchestra on YouTube. I think it's just before COVID.
She's performing with Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's either just before COVID or, early year. I can send you the YouTube link.
I'd love, yeah, please, because I want to get a contrast from the performance.
Yeah. And every performance she has, like there's a street performance from 2021 on YouTube where she's dressed like a 1940s secretary with a pencil skirt and a little beret. And then there's one with what's his name, Emmett Cohen series, where she's dressed like a 1970s hippie with the with the long, what you call them, bell bottom pants.
Bell bottom pants.
Yeah. Every performance she's dressed differently.
So she's a chameleon, kind of like a Dee Dee Bridgewater.
Yes.
Like every single time you see her, it looks completely different.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I would like to see her in her calmer, more secretarial outfit.
There you go, but yeah.
Contrast. Okay, well, good segue to Wynton. I look, when as a photographer, I look for kind of situations or hear about situations that are not necessarily concerts or performances. So I knew that I read that Wynton was going to be coming. This is at Allen Temple Baptist Church in Oakland. And he was doing like, it was going to be for kids, and Wynton's a lot about, about kids and children. So he was going to do like kind of a class, a class and a performance for some kids. And so I sat around and then, waited, and it was just kind of this nice sort of, what do I call it? Just kind of a feel-good thing, not seeing him with a big orchestra and anything. And this is a while ago. This is a fairly young Wynton. So I waited and asked him to do if he would pose for me. I loved the the stained glass behind. I shot this in black and white. I didn't, and with this horn. And I've always wanted. I've not done it. I can't do it myself, but I wanted to hand color this. I thought that this would be a nice black and white photo to hand color the stained glass behind him, and it's just to hand color that and the trumpet. And then keep the rest of it black and white. I thought that would be a really nice art piece. I haven't done it. I'm still think I'd like to do that sometime, but it's just.
So this was a film shot, not digital.
This was film. Yeah. This wasn't digital. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I'm showing is, I see the majority of it is film. Leela Downs. This is where I shot this at the Stern Grove Festival, which was still going on, and they used to have just great variety of acts. This is why you shoot color.
Mm-hmm.
it's the difference why, I mean, this screams that in black and white, this would not be nearly as energetic or as, as good a photograph if it was in black and white.
Yeah. She was here twice at the Symphony Center.
I like her a lot. I mean,
Yeah, she's
she's pretty amazing performer.
She is.
Was that a larger frame than you ended up with?
Sorry?
Did you crop that? Is that a larger frame originally?
I cropped it some, not a lot. I mean, I cropped it pretty much, and I mean, I shot it pretty tight. I was their photographer, so so they had a photo pit, so I was pretty close to her, and but I also shot it. I could see by the background. I shot it with a pretty long lens, so I dropped out the background, for her to stand out. And that's the thing about when you have a longer lens, you can do that. You can have it just gives a photo much more depth to me if you can throw out the back, cause the background to be out of focus, and then the artist to stand out from that. I always just like how that looks.
Well, on all of these, I'm really struck by your sense of composition, and you express it in framing, and also you finding these. I don't know if you're doing it intuitively. I think partly, at least, the angles, the geometry of the frame. You were talking about using the rule of thirds, but also you know how to violate that or to expand on it. So it's great eye.
Thank you. Would you like to be my rep if things getting slow in the writing?
This is as much as I do that one.
I also, the thing you're right. I like to, whether I violate or I tilt my camera a lot. I don't know. Especially with saxophone players, I'll hold my camera off center. I'll kind of tilt it. With certain music, saxophone players specifically, I'll just kind of, instead of holding the camera like I'm doing with my hands now, I'll tilt it. I'll have it a bit of an off angle, so that kind of works into my framing. So it's I might have done that with that photo that we just saw. I might have slightly tilted, so you get it kind of a different. It's
This
just
one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did do a little of that, and it's just something to play with, rather than having like a straight photograph. You get just something a little different. But for some reason, I do it a lot with like I said, with horn players, trumpets, and I'll just kind of get close and I'll just try a different angle. Doesn't work all the time. Sometimes it works, but it's a thing to play with.
So the next three are from Mardi Gras, I presume.
This was shot in New Orleans, and I have a whole series of these photographs of the Mardi Gras Indians. The story, if I know about it, it's about Mardi Gras Indians in New Orleans, like in the 1700s, when slavery was still an issue in the South. African Americans, it was difficult for them to congregate and play music or just gather on the street. So there was this place called Congo Square, which is a stage of the New Orleans Jazz Festival. And what happened with Congo, what the history of the Congo Square is that African Americans would come and gather, so like kind of a social way, and play music and just hang out with each other. And there was a lot of discrimination. They were like, people tried to prevent things like that. And so how I think it started, they started making these elaborate costumes. And these costumes, as I talked to the people involved who were in these clubs, it would take like 6 months, 6 to 9 months to make these. They would do new costumes every year for, for Mardi Gras. And it's incredible, the amount of beadwork and time that went into this and expense. So when people would confront them, the Black people and hanging out, they say, no, 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 we're not, we're not Black, we're Black Indians. That was that's how they sort of get away with like being, persecuted or being told not that they can't, perform. Not that Indians were like the most welcoming group in the South either. These were another outcast group, but that's how they got away with it. So that was the start of the tradition. And then, so I did a whole bunch of photographs of these different groups at parades and at the Jazz Festival. And there's a museum in San Francisco called the Museum of the African Diaspora. It's MOAD. And I met somebody and I did a whole series and they purchased, the photos as part of the permanent collection of the museum.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's why here it says Big Chief Comanche in the back. That's goes with in the back behind the child. That's why you said they would say they're Indians.
They would say they're Indians.
Yeah, that's where the names came from. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was kind of, I love the photos. I didn't know. I mean, I have, published some of those, I think, on stories that I've done on the Jazz Festival. I've actually photographed the New Orleans Jazz Festival, I think 15 times. I used to go like every year. Then my wife said, can we go someplace else on vacation other than New Orleans every year? And I said, why? It's so much fun,
Yeah. I mean, anyway. we go regularly too for our vacations.
Right?
Yeah. So these three are the ones that are in the museum?
Oh, they actually bought 15 photos.
Okay.
It's a collection of about 15 photos.
I see. So and these are included in that collection, these three?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, next time we're in San Francisco, we'll check it out.
Go check it out.
Yeah.
It's a nice museum. And I kind of hooked up with them when they first opened. So it's always nice. to get to sell your photographs, or have them as part of
the permanent collection.
Yeah, it's made me very happy. So I think I pretty much that's all I
Thank you very much.
So questions, any thoughts?
You do all your business yourself, Stuart?
That's a good question, Howard. I actually, I would love to do a discussion on the business, on like more of the business idea of photography and music photography. Because I think that that's a whole nother issue that I think I'd love to get involved in talking about. But yes, I do my own. I do not have any agent. I have had agencies rep my work, and now I'm kind of negotiating with Getty to do some of that. I have a contact there, so I'm probably that's gonna happen. But for the most part, yes, I've done all my. That's why I asked you if you wanted to be my rep. I send out my own things. All the magazines I've pretty much contacted on my own. Then, like I said, I've been lucky to work with writers. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for what you do. So that has been like the best connection, because I I think the two of the best writers in the Bay Area that I got to work with. And so that was really helpful. And they generally pitched the stories, and that was how that worked.
I think we could set up that as a topic, Ryer.
Sorry?
Yeah.
I think we could set that up as a topic for one of these Seeing Jazzes and have several of, the photographers we've talked to talk about business.
It's a really important discussion because it's gotten harder and harder. I mean, magazines are generally using promo stuff. It's very hard. Like, people ask me, well, you're a photographer, do you make a living at that? And I go, oh, you must shoot weddings. And I go, not so much, or I do a lot of PR events, corporate stuff. I'm doing an event tonight. But so on jazz, I used to, like, from downbeat or jazz, I used to make some money, or the occasional CD covers or stories or whatever. A lot of that has dried up. And because magazines are having a hard time, print media in general is having a hard time. So subscribers are down, and so they are looking to get photos for free. I understand that, but I don't really, but this is what I do for a living. I don't want to, go, and I'm really my own advocate for this. It's something I'm very passionate about, because I figure if you spend the time, I understand writers want to get paid for what they do. Well, photographers should get paid for what they do too. It's,
of course,
they put a lot of time into it, expense of equipment. Why is it moving towards writers get paid and photographers don't? I don't
think it's moving towards writers don't get paid either.
Well, we should all go out and boycott.
Then we don't get to do what we like to do. So,
and that's the thing, is I like to do this. I don't want to stop doing this. And I like the connections. I got into doing this more of a fan than anything. I think that any music photographer that I know started by just bringing his or her camera to a concert and going up by the stage. And that's how everybody started, because number one, they were a fan. They enjoyed the music, and I still do. I mean, that's the thing. If I have, people say, well, you get to go to poor you get to go to a concert and get paid. Can I carry your camera bag and get to go to these shows for nothing? I said, sure. Here's my camera bag, which weighs 50 pounds, and go right ahead and do that. I do like the access, and I like the connection, and I love sharing, like what we're doing now. I love the community. In the Bay Area, we have a wonderful jazz community, and we're all friends. We love seeing each other, and I like, with my colleagues, peers, I love sharing whatever, people were really generous with their time teaching me. I like to give it back.
Great.
Nice. Great. Okay. So thank you everyone for coming. Next session is on February, I think the 19th. Let me double check. It's February 18th with Bill King. And maybe in the summer we can have a session discussing the business of photography and have a panel including Stu and others.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a necessary idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, Stu.